Hi, it's Amy Shaw, the Soul Whisperer here today, and I just have so many videos I want to make, so I'm taking the time. I think I'm going to try to make 3 today. I'm actually going to be going to chemotherapy in a couple hours, so I have a little bit of time beforehand and a moment of free space. So today, another thing that I want to talk about is this idea of vibrational matching. Because again, as I shared in the last video, talking about shamanism and how it's really surrounded by a lot of these new age spirituality ideas, this idea of vibration is also a very sort of new agey idea, but it's grounded, as a lot of new age stuff is, in a very ancient and esoteric knowledge and understanding. So I don't want to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and say this whole idea of vibration is completely off, because it's not. Like a lot of new age philosophies and beliefs and ideas, there's threads of truth in them, but we really have to take each thing on its own and sort of tease out the truth from the untruth for ourselves, and what we know within our own spirit and soul to be true for ourselves. And so for me, this idea of vibration and vibrational matching is not a concept that I wholly embrace, and I'll tell you why. Because in the New Age community, a lot of times you hear low vibration or high vibe, and people will use these as sort of value judgments, you know, to say like, oh, we prefer higher vibe people, and we don't resonate with lower vibe people, or that person's not at my vibe, or, you know, you're not my vibe, you're not my tribe. You know, there's this whole sort of mentality, and really what's underlying that, what's driving that, is this concept of separation, this concept of labeling, this concept of judgment. I mean, all these things that a lot of New Age people claim that they don't do, or that they're trying to get away from, they actually do in the implementation of their ideas about these concepts. Now, vibration itself is not such a novel concept. You know, it's got an esoteric sort of, you know, understanding that goes back centuries and centuries and centuries. But vibration itself is a very interesting thing. You know, it sort of is in and through everything. And so when we think of vibration, we tend to think of sound, but it also can be caused by movement, by, you know, all sorts of things can cause vibration. Vibration itself is an energetic source. And so I would say that each individual human being has a very, very unique vibratory signature. It's unlike anybody else's, in the same sense that our fingerprints are unique and our DNA is unique. You know, there can be overlapping aspects to it, but within the self, the soul signature itself is a absolutely unique, eternal, vibratory signature. Now, that can get sort of like convoluted and tainted and promoted through the specific consciousness or incarnation at this moment in time. So what I'm getting at is, for example, me, you know, Amy Shaw, the Soul Whisperer here, you know, I'm a Sagittarius. You know, I have Aries in my descendant, and I have Libra in my ascendant, and you know, I could go into all of these things, the placements, the planetary, you know, the astrological signature, and this also feeds into the ego consciousness of this incarnation, of this moment's consciousness, and it also feeds into that sort of vibration that's occurring at this moment in this incarnation, as you're seeing me materially manifested. And so, you know, it's interesting because I ventured at the Metaphysical Fair on Sunday, and I met a woman who was talking to me about reverse polarity, and she was telling me, well, maybe I'm reverse polarized. And I've heard that before, so it's not a new term. I've even come across people that claim to do polarization therapy. But it really kind of took me back, and I thought to myself, well, what the hell is she really saying? Is she trying to say like I was born backwards? What do you mean reverse polarity? Like, what even is that? Is there a right way to be polarized and then a wrong way to be polarized? And, you know, the last video I made, I talked about unity consciousness and duality, and how, you know, the positively charged proton and the negatively charged electron are both necessary at the atomic level to create chemical bonds to create matter, you know, and that's how it works. So, you know, I understand when somebody says, oh, they're not in my vibe. Fundamentally, what they're saying is, you know, we're not in the same, you know, vibratory pattern that we're attracting each other, which is fine. I mean, that's a normal, that's one way of talking about how human beings create community and how they bond and how they, you know, get together and find commonalities and likenesses and all that stuff. It's just a spiritual way, or you maybe more esoteric way of talking about it, and I get that. I agree with that, and I understand that fundamentally. But how it's often used is in this sort of shaming way of like, oh, that person's really low vibe, man, you know. And so it puts it in this dichotomy of low and high, you know, dark and light, good and bad, you know, attractive and unattractive. And these are all sort of labels that I want to encourage people to move away from, because not only do they cause division, they also cause harm actually to people. You know, in actuality, vibration itself is a sacred expression. It's a sacred expression of creation. Every single being here on this planet, incarnated on this planet right now, whether it's somebody who's, you know, doing really horrible, awful things to other human beings, it's somebody who's suffering with, you know, cerebral palsy, trapped in a body, can't, you know, fully communicate themselves, you know, whatever the expression and the experience in this life, it's all of the Creator. It's all of the same vibratory source. And so really we're just talking about like a range, a spectrum. And to put it like, you know, in this dichotomy is just, in my understanding of it, it's moving away from unity consciousness in a way that I prefer not to. And I know I seem contradictory because I just recently made a video talking about duality. And this is a thing I'm going to talk in my next video about entity attachment, because it's related to that. A lot of people have been coming to me, especially recently, and I'm going to talk about that in the next video, with entity attachment. And so how this is relating, I guess, to that is that people come and have this expectation that I'm going to like kill or get rid of, you know, these entities. In my understanding, that's not exactly how shamanism works. I don't know anybody personally that has the capability to do that. I mean, the basic dynamics of nature, of natural law, is that nothing can be created or destroyed, only transmuted. It's a law of matter, it's a law in chemistry. I mean, every hard science class I've taken, it's basic fundamental law. And I think in the spiritual realm it applies that way as well. I mean, people say that we're creators or we're God. We're not. We're not creators. We're not. We co-create to some extent, but we are not source creators. Only source is the source creator. Did we create our own souls? Of course we didn't. Source created our souls. So can we destroy another soul? Of course we cannot. Can we guide and facilitate in transmutation and changing one thing to another thing? Of course we can. You know, in the same way that we can take an ice cube out of the freezer and allow it to melt and turn into water. Or we can take an egg out of the refrigerator and crack it open and cook it and create, you know, a cooked egg to eat. You know, we have the power to transmute things, but we didn't create the egg, we didn't create the chicken, we cannot create that. Now people can get all real high in their esotericism and say, but reality is all a creation, this is all just, you know, a matrix illusion, whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about day-to-day practical life, feet on the ground, being grounded. You know, you cannot be in shamanic practice and have your head so far up in the clouds that you're constantly in this mystical state of being. You can't, that's, you know, it is of help to certain people at certain times. But the path of shamanism is to be with the people of your tribe that are hurting, that are suffering, that are going through illness, that have symptoms. That's the role of the shaman, is to be present and aware and gathering information about what that's about and guiding and assisting that individual in healing that. So in a very specific way, you know, in a very specific way. So because that's what shamanism is, I don't go towards those sort of mystical new age, you know, we create our own reality, even though there's truth to that. I understand there's truth to that fundamentally, but it's not practical. It's just not a practical way to approach shamanic work. and working with people. So when we think of vibratory pattern, it's important to realize, as a person that's in shamanic practice, I don't say somebody that comes to me and they're going through something, maybe their symptoms are really profound and they want relief, they're struggling. I don't say to them, well, you're low vibe, man, you're not a vibratory match for me, so you got to just get out of my field. If I'm attracting a certain type of people, which I'm going to talk about that in the next video, how that actually is occurring for me right now. If I'm attracting a certain kind of people, I don't look at that and say to myself, well, what's wrong with me and my vibration? It doesn't work like that. It's just a beautiful expression. It's like Indra's net, where each thing's reflecting off the other. It's a beautiful expression of the people that we attract and why we attract them. And, it's all for our higher good. It's all for our learning, our development, all that stuff. So I just want to encourage you, when you think about vibration, to think about it in terms of the sacredness, to look at it fully with soul eyes and not through these like shallow or hollow new age eyes that want to like put a judgment on it of high versus low, or me versus you, or you're in my circle, you're not. To not think of it in those terms, but to think of each individual as a sacred expression, vibratory expression created by the source that's here for a very specific purpose in this incarnation, in this moment of consciousness. And that it's a beautiful thing. Even if the individual is doing things that you don't like, that you don't agree with, that you don't understand, that feel negative to you, or they feel prickly to you, even in those instances, there's still a sacredness to the human being. And to be able to hold that person in sacredness doesn't mean like unilaterally accept everybody and like bring everybody into your circle. It doesn't mean that. I mean, we can move away from people because they don't represent our highest good at that moment, or how we understand it. We can put boundaries, and we can, do the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves and keep ourselves healthy and safe. But by the same token, to recognize, namaste to somebody, that they are a sacred individual. They're here having an experience, a human experience, that they are source just like we are source. And that their vibratory pattern is just one aspect on a spectrum, and that even in the moment of how we're seeing it through our own eyes. We may not even be seeing it clearly. There's a wonderful, wonderful passage in scripture where Paul talks about, now I see in part, but then I shall be known fully. He's talking about when he transitions, into the spiritual realm after death. That how we see in part is like dimly through a mirror, basically. We don't see, we see dimly. But how we will see when we pass over will be much more pristinely clear. And I think that that's truth. No matter how evolved we are, we still carry with us this basic ego operating system with which we process and see everything. We can't really get away from that. So, how we view somebody else's vibration might actually be in part a projection of our own reality creation. And so in that sense, we have to detach ourselves from that, in the sense of saying, that we honor and recognize, the sovereignty of each individual and the source creation of each individual as a unique expression, a beautiful, sacred, unique, vibratory expression that is here for a very specific purpose. And it's not for us to say or to reject or to, make judgment on that in any way. So I hope that gave you some idea, at least of me, my beliefs, how I practice, how I sort of view that, and the integrity I hold with that. And as always, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to get a hold of me. And I hope that you have a great day. I love you guys.